What he didn't know, what he never expected, was that the one system he thought was unbreakable, his marriage, was already corrupted. It started with small things. Subtle, but off. His wife, Madison, had always been predictable. She worked at Suncrest Travel Agency, handling high-end clients who booked luxury vacations. She used to complain about work, about dealing with demanding customers who expected first-class treatment for economy-class budgets. But lately, she loved work. She was staying late more often. She was checking her phone constantly, and she had started wearing perfume again, a scent Ethan hadn't smelled on her in years. At first, Ethan brushed it off. After 10 years together, people changed. But then came the night that changed everything. Ethan was working late in his home office, debugging a complex program when he heard laughter from the bedroom. Not just any laughter. Madison's. Soft, sweet, flirty. He leaned back in his chair, frowning. It wasn't normal. She never laughed like that with him anymore. Ethan stood up, walked quietly down the hallway, and stopped outside the slightly ajar bedroom door. Then he heard it. "I wish you were here with me." Madison's voice was low, almost a whisper. I know. It would have been amazing." Ethan's heart stopped. She was talking to someone else. The sound of a text notification vibrated against the nightstand. Ethan clenched his fists, taking a deep breath before pushing the door open just enough to see inside. Madison was lying in bed, her phone screen glowing in the dim light. Her face was flushed, her fingers hovering over the screen, as if hesitant to type something. Then, after a moment, she typed, smiled, and hit send. Ethan didn't say a word. He turned and walked back to his office, his mind racing. His wife had just lied to him, and that meant one thing. Something was very, very wrong. Ethan Walker had spent years solving complex problems, analyzing code, and detecting vulnerabilities before they could be exploited. And now, he realized, his marriage had a serious vulnerability, one that Madison thought he wouldn't find. But she had forgotten one thing. Ethan wasn't just a husband. He was a programmer. And no system, no lie, was ever completely secure. The morning after Ethan overheard Madison's late-night whispers, he decided to test her. At 7:30 a.m., while they were having breakfast, he casually asked, "So, who were you talking to last night?" Madison froze for half a second. Just enough time for Ethan to see the panic before she covered it up with a smile. "Oh, just Chloe," she said, taking a sip of coffee. She was venting about work. Ethan nodded slowly, watching her reaction. He didn't call her out. He didn't show his hand. Instead, he stored the lie in his mind, just like he did when debugging faulty code. Because one lie could be excused, but multiple? That was a pattern. And Ethan was about to connect the dots. That day at work, Ethan couldn't focus. Lines of code blurred in front of him as he kept replaying Madison's words in his head. "I wish you were here with me." Who had she been talking to? And more importantly, how long had this been going on? Ethan didn't jump to conclusions easily, but the logical part of his brain kept analyzing the evidence. New perfume, new behavior, late-night phone calls, lies. Something was happening behind his back, and he needed to find out exactly what it was. That night, while Madison was in the shower, Ethan did something he never thought he'd do. He picked up her phone. Locked. Of course. But Ethan had cracked tougher codes than this. He tried the obvious passwords. Their anniversary? Wrong. Her birthday? Wrong. His birthday? Wrong. Then, he tried the travel agency's customer system password, something Madison had joked about using in the past. Bingo. The phone unlocked. Ethan inhaled deeply, steadying his hands as he opened her messages. And what he saw made his stomach drop. The conversation thread was under the name Ethan, but the texts weren't to him. A cover name. Ethan scrolled up, scanning the messages. Unknown man. I can't wait for our trip. Madison. Me neither. It's going to be amazing. Unknown man. Just the two of us. No distractions. Madison. Exactly what I need. Ethan's chest tightened. A trip? She had booked a trip with someone else? Then he saw the next message, and it nearly made him throw the phone across the room. Unknown man. Did you tell your husband yet? Madison's response. Madison. Not yet. But don't worry, he never checks the finances. Ethan felt a wave of cold fury rise in him. Not only was she cheating, she was using his money to do it. Ethan opened Madison's email next, his mind moving a mile a minute. And there it was. A luxury cruise reservation, booked under the name Madison Walker, and a man named Ryan Cooper. Ryan Cooper. The name meant nothing to him, but that was about to change. Because now, this wasn't suspicion anymore. This was proof. And Ethan Walker was about to show Madison that when you cheat on a programmer, you don't just get caught. You get completely erased. Ethan Walker sat in his dimly lit office, his fingers tight around his phone as he stared at the name on the cruise reservation. Ryan Cooper. Who the hell was he? Ethan had spent his career solving complex problems, debugging thousands of lines of code, hunting down digital threats before they could do any real damage. But this was a different kind of problem, and Ethan was about to treat it like any other threat, track it, isolate it, and eliminate it. By morning, Ethan had dug deep. Ryan Cooper wasn't just some random guy. He was a client at Madison's travel agency, a man who had booked multiple luxury vacations in the past year. A businessman, but not a particularly successful one. His company, Cooper and Marks Consulting, had a long list of pending lawsuits, debt, shady dealings. And now, he was planning a romantic cruise with Ethan's wife. Ethan clenched his jaw, feeling his pulse in his temples. This wasn't just a fling. This was planned, thought out, paid for with his money. That evening, Ethan played it cool. He watched Madison carefully. Every word she said felt rehearsed. Work was exhausting today. Lie. She barely worked at all. I might have to travel soon for a client booking. Lie. The only booking she had was for her and Ryan. I love you. Biggest lie of them all. Ethan stared at her from across the table, nodding slowly. He didn't react. Didn't let on that he had proof. Because he was still collecting data. Still setting the trap. The next day, Ethan made his first move. He had learned from experience. Sometimes, you don't need to hack into a system to break it. Sometimes, you just need to find the right person with the right information. And that's how he ended up tracking down Ryan Cooper's wife, Lena Cooper. The woman Ryan was also lying to. Ethan waited outside a small cafe in downtown Austin, watching as a woman in her early 30s walked toward him. She looked composed, but her eyes had a tired sharpness to them, like someone who had spent too long pretending everything was fine. Just like him. She sat down, folding her arms. You said it was important. Ethan slid his phone across the table. Your husband is cheating on you. Lena didn't blink. Then, after a beat, she smirked. I knew it. Ethan's brows lifted slightly. You did? She nodded. I just didn't know who with. Ethan exhaled. Madison Walker. My wife. Lena looked at the proof on his phone. The cruise booking, the messages Ethan had pulled from Madison's cloud backup. Then she leaned back, shaking her head. Son of a bitch. Ethan had expected anger, denial, excuses, but Lena was focused. She tapped her nails on the table. What do you want to do about this? Ethan stared at her, surprised by how calm she was. She wasn't broken. She was calculating. I want to make sure they don't get away with it, Ethan said. Lena tilted her head. Good. A small smirk pulled at her lips. Because so do I. Ethan Walker never expected to form an alliance with the wife of the man his wife was cheating with. But here he was, sitting across from Lena Cooper, watching as she processed the disgusting truth about her husband, Ryan. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't fall apart like he had expected. Instead, she just smiled coldly, like someone who had just found the missing piece of a puzzle she had been working on for too long. And Ethan? He saw something familiar in her. The same rage. The same betrayal. The same hunger for revenge. Lena tapped the table, staring at the evidence Ethan had collected. Madison and Ryan. She exhaled, shaking her head. I should have known. He's been sneaky with his phone for months. Ethan leaned forward. What else do you know? Lena thought for a moment. Ryan's been pushing this big business deal. Some kind of merger with a travel agency. He's been obsessed with securing the investors. Ethan's stomach tightened. A travel agency? He didn't even have to guess. He knew. Suncrest Travel, Madison's company. This wasn't just a secret affair. This was something bigger. Ethan sat back, processing the information. Ryan wasn't just sleeping with Madison. He was using her. And if Madison was helping him, that meant she was more involved in his schemes than he thought. Lena narrowed her eyes. What are you thinking? Ethan tapped his fingers on the table. We're not just dealing with two cheaters, he said. We're dealing with two liars who are working together on something bigger than us. Lena smirked. Well, she said, that just makes ruining them more fun. Over the next 2 days, Ethan and Lena started digging deeper. Lena searched Ryan's business emails while he was asleep, forwarding Ethan contracts and deals tied to Suncrest Travel. Ethan ran data recovery on Madison's laptop, finding hidden messages and financial transfers. Together, they uncovered a pattern. Ryan had been funneling money into fake accounts, using Madison as his inside connection at the travel agency. And the worst part? Madison wasn't just helping him. She was profiting from it. Secret accounts, offshore transfers, business deals disguised as personal vacations. This wasn't just infidelity. This was fraud. And suddenly, Ethan realized something. He wasn't just about to expose an affair. He was about to destroy Madison and Ryan's entire world. On Friday night, Ethan came home late. Madison was on the couch, her laptop open, typing away. She smiled too easily when she saw him. Hey, babe. Ethan nodded. Long day. She stretched. Same here. Lie. She hadn't been at work. Ethan had already tracked her location. She had spent the day at a private hotel with Ryan. Madison yawned. I think I'm gonna turn in early. You okay? Ethan smirked internally. Yeah, he said. And for the first time in weeks, he wasn't angry. Because now, he wasn't just gathering evidence. He was preparing for war. And when he was done, Madison and Ryan wouldn't just be exposed. They would be ruined. Forever. Ethan Walker sat in his office, staring at the evidence spread across his desk. Bank statements, emails, messages, proof of fraud, proof of betrayal. Every single lie Madison and Ryan had told, exposed in black and white. For the first time since discovering the affair, Ethan didn't feel rage. He felt power. Because now, he controlled the game. And Madison and Ryan had no idea they were already losing. Lena Cooper had been working just as hard. At 2 a.m., she sent Ethan a message. Lena, I found something big. Meet me tomorrow. Ethan didn't ask questions. By 10 a.m., they were sitting in Lena's car, parked outside Ryan's office. Lena handed Ethan a USB drive. I got into his personal laptop, she said, and you won't believe what I found. Ethan plugged the drive into his own laptop, scanning the files. And then, he froze. One file stood out. Suncrest accounts, 2024, a spreadsheet. Ethan opened it, his pulse spiking. Inside, he saw dozens of transactions. Ryan had been moving large sums of money through fake bookings at Suncrest Travel, with Madison's approval. This wasn't just a one-time scam. This was organized fraud. And Madison wasn't just a participant. She was an accomplice. Ethan clenched his jaw. This wasn't just about cheating anymore. This wasn't just about a failed marriage. This was criminal. Madison had spent years living in comfort, using his money while secretly helping another man steal from others. And now, Ethan had the power to destroy them both. Lena smirked from the driver's seat. You still want to do this? She asked. Ethan exhaled slowly. Then he looked at her and said, let's burn them to the ground. That night, Ethan put everything into motion. First, he made copies of all the evidence, the fraud records, the emails, the travel bookings. Then, he prepared 2 major attacks. Legal destruction. He contacted an anonymous whistleblower hotline and sent all evidence of fraud to federal authorities. He drafted a legal case, preparing to present it to Suncrest Travel's executives. Personal destruction. He scheduled anonymous messages to be sent to Madison's and Ryan's friends, families, and colleagues, detailing the affair and the fraud. He planted one last piece of bait, a fake business opportunity that would lure them into exposing themselves even further. By the time he was done, Madison and Ryan were walking straight into their own destruction. And in 48 hours, they wouldn't just be exposed. they would be completely ruined. Ethan Walker had always been patient. It was a skill he had mastered through years of programming, waiting for code to execute, for problems to expose themselves, for systems to crash under their own weight. And tonight, Madison and Ryan's system was going to crash. Hard. At exactly 8 a.m., the first domino fell. Suncrest Travel's executives received an anonymous email loaded with every fraudulent transaction tied to Ryan Cooper. Fake client names. Luxury bookings with no real customers attached. Large payouts funneled through shell accounts. And at the bottom, Madison's direct involvement. By 9:30 a.m., Madison was called into a meeting. At 9:45 a.m., she was fired. And by 10 a.m., her company card, benefits, and access to company files were revoked. She tried calling Ethan. He didn't pick up. At 11 a.m., a second wave of emails hit. This time, the recipients were Ryan's business partners, Madison's family, Ryan's wife, Lena, who had been waiting for this moment. Every email contained screenshots of Madison and Ryan's private messages, proof of their affair, hotel bookings with timestamps proving their deception. By noon, the rumors had spread like wildfire. Ryan's business contacts started pulling out. Madison's family stopped answering her calls. The walls were closing in, and neither of them had any idea where the attack was coming from. By the time Ryan checked his phone, he had 10 missed calls from investors and clients. Then, at 12:30 p.m., he walked into his office and found his business partners waiting for him. They had seen the evidence. They had already called their lawyers. And just like that, Ryan Cooper was forced out of his own company. No title, no money, no control. By the time he processed what was happening, it was already too late. At 2 p.m., Madison was sitting alone in a coffee shop, trying to make sense of her new reality. She had lost her job. She had lost her family's support. She had lost everything she thought was secure. And worst of all, Ryan wasn't answering her calls. Her so-called future, the man she thought she was building a new life with, was already trying to disappear. At 6 p.m., Madison finally returned home. She opened the door and saw Ethan sitting at the kitchen table, waiting for her. She froze. His expression was unreadable. Calm, cold, deadly. "Sit," he said. Her throat went dry. "Ethan, sit." Madison swallowed hard and did as he said. Then Ethan slid a manila envelope across the table. Inside, divorce papers. Her hands shook as she opened it. Her voice cracked. "Ethan, please." He cut her off. "You're done lying." Madison's eyes filled with tears. She knew. She had lost him, and nothing she said could change that. By midnight, Ethan was gone. Ryan was left with nothing. Madison was left with nothing. And Ethan? For the first time in months, he felt free. But the war wasn't over yet, because now it was time for the final step. The revenge Madison and Ryan never saw coming. Madison sat at the kitchen table, her hands trembling as she stared at the divorce papers Ethan had just given her. It wasn't just over, it was final. She had lost everything in less than 24 hours. Her job? Gone. Her reputation? Destroyed. Her future with Ryan? A joke. And now, the man she had betrayed the most was the one holding all the power. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice broken, but when she looked up, he was already standing at the door. He didn't even hesitate, didn't even give her a second glance. And then, he was gone, leaving Madison alone in the ruins of the life she had destroyed. Meanwhile, Ryan Cooper was falling apart. After losing his company, his investors, and his reputation, he had tried to do damage control. But it was too late. Ethan's revenge had been too precise. By the time Ryan reached out to his wealthy business contacts, the doors were already shut. Nobody wanted to work with a fraud. And now, the legal charges were coming. He had spent years conning people. Now, he was about to pay the price. For Ethan, revenge wasn't just about ruining their lives. It was about making sure they never recovered. So he made one final move. He ensured Madison's name was permanently tied to Ryan's fraudulent dealings, making sure she was investigated along with him. He leaked more evidence of Ryan's schemes to business watchdogs and government agencies. He blocked every account Madison could use, leaving her with nothing. By the end of the week, Ryan was being sued, and Madison was a social outcast. Neither of them had any way out. And Ethan? Ethan had one. Madison spent the next few months in hiding, bouncing between cheap motels and distant relatives who wanted nothing to do with her. Ryan was forced into bankruptcy and left the city in disgrace. And Ethan? Ethan moved on. For the first time in years, he was free. No more lies. No more cheating. No more Madison. And he never looked back. 3 months ago, Madison Walker had been a successful professional with a stable marriage and a bright future. Now, she was homeless, broke, and completely alone. She had tried everything to claw her way back to normal. She had applied to multiple jobs, but every interview ended the same. The employers had heard about the fraud case. Her name was toxic in the travel industry. She had tried to reconnect with her family, but the scandal had spread. They didn't trust her. They wouldn't help her. She had tried to call Ethan, but his number was changed. Blocked. Forever. Madison sat on the mattress of a rundown motel, staring at the stained walls, wondering how she had let everything slip away. Her phone buzzed. Her heart leaped. Maybe it was a job offer, some chance to restart. But when she checked the screen, her stomach sank. It was a legal notice. Suncrest Travel had officially filed charges against her. Ethan's evidence had been airtight. Every fraudulent booking, every shady financial transaction, every piece of proof connecting her to Ryan's crimes had been handed over to the authorities. Now, Madison was facing a possible trial. She had no lawyer, no defense, and no one left to help her. Ryan Cooper had spent years being a smooth-talking businessman. Now, he was a ghost of himself. After being forced out of his own company, he had tried to run, escaping to another city to start fresh. But Ethan had made sure there was no fresh start. The business world was small. His reputation followed him everywhere. Now, he was drowning in lawsuits, his assets frozen, his so-called future in ruins. One night, Madison tracked him down. She had nowhere else to go. When she knocked on the door of his cheap apartment, he opened it and stared at her coldly. She forced a smile. Ryan. He crossed his arms. What do you want? Madison's throat tightened. We need to figure this out. Together. Ryan laughed bitterly. There is no together, Madison. She flinched. But you told me we were building something. Ryan leaned against the doorframe. Unmoved. Uninterested. That was before Ethan burned our lives to the ground. Madison's breath shook. We could still fix this, she whispered. Ryan sighed. Tired. Done. Madison, wake up. His voice was sharp, cold, final. We're never coming back from this. Then he did the one thing she never expected. He shut the door in her face, just like Ethan had. And just like that, Madison had lost everything. While Madison and Ryan were sinking, Ethan was moving forward. He had finalized the divorce. He had secured his assets. He had changed his number, moved to a new place, and erased every trace of them from his life. One day, he received a letter in the mail. From Madison. He stared at it for a long moment. Then, without opening it, he threw it away. Because Madison Walker was nothing to him now, the letter never reached Ethan. Madison had written it as a desperate attempt, a final plea for forgiveness, for help, for anything. But it was too late. Ethan had moved on. Ryan had abandoned her. And now, Madison was truly alone. She spent her last few dollars on rent for a rundown motel room outside of Austin. She had nothing left. No money. No career. No friends. No future. She had lost everything because of one mistake she couldn't take back. And worst of all, the man she had thrown her life away for, Ryan Cooper, had left her in the dust. She was finally seeing him for who he really was. A liar. A fraud. A man who never cared about her. Just like she had never truly cared about Ethan. Now, she was the one suffering. While Madison was sinking into total despair, Ryan was desperately fighting to stay afloat. His bank accounts were frozen. His business was bankrupt. His debt collectors were closing in. But Ryan wasn't the type to go down quietly. Instead of taking responsibility, he started looking for an escape route. A new scam. A new identity. But this time, there was no way out. At 3 p.m., while drinking alone in a bar, two men in suits approached his table. They were federal investigators. The fraud charges had caught up to him, and by the end of the night, Ryan Cooper was in handcuffs. His career was over. His freedom was gone. And Ethan's revenge was complete. One evening, Ethan got a call from an unknown number. He didn't answer. But then, a voicemail appeared. He debated deleting it. He had spent months erasing Madison from his life. But something made him press play. Madison's voice came through the speaker. Weak, broken, defeated. Ethan, I know you won't listen to this, but I don't know who else to call. She took a deep breath. I lost everything. Ryan's gone. My job's gone. I don't even have a home anymore. A pause. I just need to know if you ever cared. If there's any part of you that can still. Ethan deleted the message. No hesitation. No regret. No second thoughts. Because Madison didn't exist to him anymore. And she never would again. Madison Walker had always assumed that, no matter what happened, she would land on her feet. She had been confident once. Smart. Beautiful. The kind of woman who always had a way out, always had options. But now, she had nothing. She sat in a cold, empty motel room, staring at the cracked walls, listening to the sound of her own breathing. Her phone was dead. Her bank account was empty. Her life, the one she had built with Ethan, was gone. The worst part? She had done this to herself, and there was no fixing it. She had tried everything to reach Ethan. She called. He never answered. She emailed. The message bounced back. He had blocked her. She sent a letter. No response. At first, she thought he just needed time. That maybe, after the dust settled, he would forgive her. But now, after months of silence, she understood. Ethan wasn't just angry. He was done. Completely. And that hurt more than anything. Because it meant that, even if she begged, even if she cried, even if she apologized 1,000 times over, it wouldn't change a thing. As Madison sat in her misery, Ryan Cooper's fate had been sealed as well. His trial date was set. His assets had been seized. His former investors were testifying against him. The once charming con man was now a disgraced criminal, staring at potential prison time for the fraudulent schemes Ethan had exposed. No fancy cars. No women chasing after him. No high-stakes business deals. Just a man drowning in his own destruction. And Madison? She was just another casualty in his wake. Ethan sat in his new apartment, a simpler place far away from the ghosts of his past. For the first time in years, he felt at peace. No more checking Madison's phone, wondering if she was lying. No more waiting up at night, hoping she was faithful. No more waking up next to a stranger. She was gone, and he was free. One day, while checking his mail, Ethan found another letter. From Madison. He stared at it for a long time, didn't open it, didn't even consider it, because he already knew what it would say. Regret, apologies, excuses, and none of it mattered, because there were some things you couldn't undo, some betrayals that cut too deep. Ethan didn't burn the letter, didn't shred it. He simply threw it away, and never looked back. Madison never recovered. She spent the next few years bouncing between dead-end jobs, cheap apartments, and regret that never left her. Ryan? Ryan was convicted. 6 years in federal prison. And Ethan? Ethan built a new life, one where Madison was nothing but a distant memory. She had gambled everything, and lost it all, because sometimes the worst revenge was simply walking away, and letting karma do the rest. Thank you for listening to the story to the end. Please like, share your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel.